Okay, here we are. Emanuele, welcome for the second show, the second conversation about entrepreneurial ecosystems, with a little bit of a touch, looking at hair, but probably way beyond. It's been a pleasure last time, and I'm looking so much forward to hear today from you more about the how to approach such a concept.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really energized about this conversation, and I'm very much looking forward to be a bit more specific this time and go
Right.
into the details because we tend to agree on some of main concepts, but then when you look at the dynamics and the solutions, well, there is a lot to discuss. Happy to
Right.
be here.
Right. So, Emanuele, there's one thing. I don't want to repeat anything, have us repeating what we already discussed last time, but maybe we can attach to where we're coming from. And when we talk about an entrepreneurial ecosystem like Hayer created it, I think you're always referring to the triple E's, right? I think it's something about entrepreneurial. You know better. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this to enter the conversation. What this means.
So, what we are talking about, or the starting point, is not, I believe, organization design. It's the market. So I am an organization design person, but still I believe what we are talking about is business, strategy, customers. And what we are seeing is that many organizations are asking themselves what to do if they want to play some kind of role in the market. And this role is the role of the aggregator, the role of the platform, being able to tap into ecosystem. And if you look at some of the major companies in terms of capitalization today, it's just Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, Facebook. Most of them at the end are empowering others. It could be billions of people, it could be millions of companies to interact with each other. This is very simple. So the question is there any impact on how we design and how we have designed organizations for the last 100 years and more, since the same way has been used for this time. So nothing has changed into the internal size of the organization. What we are seeing, what Ayer has been doing actually, and today I think we want to talk about doing, is that you necessarily must mirror some of the market-like dynamics that you see outside, inside the firm. So we talk about this concept of the entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling organization to say that we want to enable an ecosystem of small teams, micro enterprises, but also other companies outside to come together with each team being like an enterprise, like an entrepreneurs with much more freedom, for example, than what we have seen in the agile space. Agile is about self-management. It's about delivering value as quickly as possible. It's about user stories. Here we talk on top of this about ownership, about profit and loss, about entrepreneurs, about the possibility to hire people, to decide how much you want to pay them, and to build an organization not of 5 or 10 or 1,000 people, of 80,000 people, tens of thousands of people, this way, without hierarchy. So that's what we are talking about. And if you ask many practitioners and scholars, they will tell you this is impossible. Well, it's possible, it's happening, and there are thousands of organizations trying to learn from it, and some of them to put it in practice.
Right. Cool. And that's really, again, pointing to the numbers because you referred to this. Hair is much more than 4,000 of such micro enterprises, right? 4,000 thousands of smaller groups where everyone, I mean, a little bit under apostrophe, is a CEO, where everyone thinks about the business and not just doing a job, right? At least trying to, and that's what we're trying to do to look into today. Before, a little bit of housekeeping for everyone who's watching. Feel free, please, to add your questions, whatever comes up for you, into the chat, whatever channel you're watching from. We'll try to make it as possible. Um, in about 45 minutes, we're live here to bring them in and answer them as they fit into our conversation. Now, let's start with the first thing about the how, because the question is always where to start. And you have always been referring to evolution when you refer to these bigger cases like hair. And I know you work with many, many organizations on such concepts. And the question is always, right, where do you start evolution? Because evolution somehow happens, right? You can't directly manipulate evolution. But when it comes to such concepts, I'd always think about the boardroom. Let's say here is an organization, whether it's owned, run by the owners, whether it's run by an executive team. Here we go. They're interested in these concepts. They would love to learn more, maybe go for such a journey. What's happening from there?
Yeah, let's be frank here, because of course we are imagining a flatter, more transparent, more entrepreneurial, adaptive organization. Cool. But still, I don't know, 95% of the organizations in the world, 90% are different, are hierarchical. So most of my clients are not Google, are not Facebook, are like this. And as we already anticipated last time, to me, the first question is why? Why should I care about this? And probably if you are talking to the exco, if you're talking about the board or the CEO, they don't care about micro enterprises. What they care about is being more innovative, getting more from their people, being able to have a closer, more productive relationship with customers in which they don't sell only products, but they have this long-term premium ecosystemic relationships in which customers are no longer customers, but co-creators. So it's at the end some strategic directions that in my experience, most organizations in the world, especially bureaucratic and hierarchical organizations, right now desire. So to me, this is the starting point. And there are some exceptions, but I believe there are less and less exceptions of companies only focusing on scalable efficiency, just doing the same thing again and again and again and better. Again, COVID told us that we cannot predict the future. It's clear. It was clear before, but now each one of us has been impacted. So if we now understood this is not possible, and if we want more entrepreneurship, if we want more engagement, well, just launching an internal campaign or paying employees a bit more or having some games, in the office won't make the trick. You need to help your organization to evolve. And you're right, evolution is not something that you can dictate. And this brings me to really the how. When I see boards or organizations asking me, okay, what's the Gantt, what's the target operating model, what is the set of activities that will bring us from here to there in 3 months or 4 months? The answer is none. There is none. It's not going to happen like this, because the process we need should be aligned with the result that we want to reach. And if the result is an ecosystem, it's messy, it's unpredictable, it's made by many actors, well, there is no way you can use a neat, precise, top-down approach. So the starting point for me is the why, and then very simply looking at people into the organization that feel the urge to contribute to this why, that want to be unlocked, that want to have more freedom and sometimes more risk, personally speaking, to contribute to that why. Again, I think this is resonating with most organizations in the world. The only difference is that, again, Hire did it, and there are other examples, just Zappos, that did it similarly in a different space. So we're starting to see a pattern, regardless of the specific solution. addressing somewhat universal needs in the market. And to me, this is very noteworthy.
Oh, right. Now, dictating evolution obviously is a little bit of a trivial perspective. Of course, we can figure out how to set punctuation points, right? And there are many opportunities. I mean, you mentioned the pandemic. That's probably something many organizations use because they just say, hey, there is something, and we should probably lean back and have a better conversation about the future. We will dive closer into the operational parts of it because, again, we have limited time. But I want to first stay a little bit on the leadership bit because just to address this, do you think, or in your experience, that these kind of conversation partners you found in organizations, call it this way, leaders, that they came to a conclusion that they have these limits themselves, limits in the organizations, limits towards the future? Is this something where you see a difference in the, I don't know how I can call it in order not to be arrogant, state of mind or something?
I think
Something
this
like
is maybe one of the few preconditions here.
that.
So I don't believe you can convince them that that's what it's happening in the world. It's very difficult because it's a personal maturation journey. And if you don't see it, if you don't feel it, well, okay, I don't believe a consultant can convince you.
Right.
But I see more and more leaders that honestly believe to have a different role. The role of the coach, of the enabler, leading from the back, empowering others. And this is connected to an idea of the organization, which the organization design is not the gauge. It's not the structure. It's not only the workflows and processes. It's a matter of values and principles, or to say it with Days know them, enabling constraints. So the role of the leader is not to predict and to control and command what we have been doing forever. It's to trust the system, to trust the human beings, and to empower them with the minimum viable set of principles to go in the right direction. This is very difficult, and I would say most leaders or most managers are not ready, and that's perfectly fine. But if you look at what Jean Grimin has been doing in Hire, he has been thinking, talking, giving the example, preaching, pushing the organization, pushing in a subtle way, not with coercion, in under kind of view of the world, of the market and the organization itself. So I see leaders as people representing purpose, representing a bit an idea of the world and the role of the business, more than operational people controlling their teams and trying to only look at the numbers. This is really different again. So most of the market is not ready, and we are trying to work with the people that instead have already reached this stage and want to know how.
Right. Now let's assume you're having this conversation. So we take one step further, and probably it takes a while to have these dialogues over various rounds with different people, bringing external people in, having just deep conversations about, probably it's about not only the why, but about the who we are, right? It's probably about the identity of who we are and who we want to be in the future. And that all attached to what does that mean to what we do. How could we imagine to potentially get started somehow? I mean, first of all, is this typical question, is that a all-in? Is this always an all-in thing, like saying, all right, no matter how large we are, now we need to break it up into into an ecosystem with small little structures? Or is it something you could also start in parts of the organization? Again, so evolution, right?
2 examples. There is one Italian company, very surprising. They attended one of our courses, and they are very good, maybe. We met them after 4 months, and they told us, we have done it. You have done what? Yeah, we have implemented. So we have taken inspiration from the Rendani. There are 50 people. They are a communication agency. They are young digital people, if you want. But in 50 years, they dramatically redesigned their structure to have what they call kitchens and chefs. So you don't have micro enterprises and the micro enterprise owners. But the idea is the same. So 50 people in which the organization acts more as an incubator, a venture for the small teams with plenty of freedom and agility. So this is the example, and that's not the only example. Make in Thailand, one of the interviews, the trio conversations we had in the last few months is another example. 70 people, professional services in Asia that are doing exactly this, starting from agile ideas, for example. So this is possible. Of course, if you have 80,000 people, I believe you should never think about this approach.
Right.
So I've never seen any organization of this size just getting rid of everything, putting business continuity at risk to become an ecosystem. So there are other ways, and the way is starting from the why, launching a call to action to a large portion of your organization. Here we use the concept of a microcosm taken from all scale change. And microcosm, it's not the entire organization, it's the smallest group representative of the entire organization. And with that, I mean cultures, hierarchical levels, maturity, functional expertise, businesses, brands, whatever you have. Usually you can do this with 40, 50 people, 100 people, and you can ask them to translate the example of Hire, but other examples, Morningstar, Buurtzorg, Zappos, Valve, many others, into something relevant for their business. And it's only them that could be able to do this because I don't understand their business. And probably not even their leaders understand exactly all the nuances and the characteristics of their business. So first of all, this is a participative co-creation exercise. So in other terms, we are transferring the ownership, even of direction, of strategy, to the organization. That's frightening. So, the board is holding the space, a generative space, for people in the organization, not necessarily managers, to see an opportunity, and they're enabling them to pursue this opportunity. So the process, it's a massive exploration exercise in which, let's say, the project team creates these enabling conditions. An enabling condition, just to be very concrete, is, okay, I have a job. I have a daily job. Probably I'm overloaded. I have too many meetings, too many responsibilities, too much pressure. And now you are telling me that I can create a new micro enterprise. When? During nights, during weekends, they're busy already, maybe working, right? So the first question is where I'm going to find the time. How much time should I dedicate to that? It's at 100% or 5%. And there is no single right answer here. Make one of the examples in Thailand has been using an innovation management process to do that. So you come up with an idea and you have 20%, a bit like Google, 20% of your time to validate, to pitch the idea. When you find the first 3 clients, it will become 40%. When you do the first million, it will become 80%. Maybe that's going to be your main activity. And the company is investing with you, not just time, but also money. So you are not sinking the ship, and you are giving real space to the people to become entrepreneurs into the firm. So this is not about destroying everything and starting from scratch. It's an iterative, gradual process. That's not the only way. Absolutely. So you can find ways to transfer knowledge to different teams. You may find strategies to keep the hierarchy. This is very important. So maintaining the same reporting lines and seeing the hierarchy as a set of virtual micro enterprises. So, it's on paper, but you still have your boss. But you may use contracts what Ayer calls ecosystem micro communities to pool people and to orchestrate them around the user scenarios. So what is happening is that yes, you have your main job, but you enter into these loosely coupled contracts and you start to work in a different way with more space, and the value is shared back also with your boss in the hierarchy. So even the hierarchy is benefiting from this. If this is working at the end, it's creating a pull force, bringing people and moving them closer and closer and closer to customers. So it's a transition. That's why I talk about an evolution. It's not overnight. It's not in 3 months. It takes usually years. But you can, if you look at the example of Fujitsu, Fujitsu is one of the biggest organizations in this experimentation. They started from 15 micro enterprises in a specific region with specific business goals, with lots of freedom in which the team can decide the pricing, can approve deals, can pick the people, can share profit. With some things they cannot decide. They cannot decide the product, they cannot pick another brand. So there is some coherence, but lots of freedom. And they achieved the business goals. So at the end, they are measured at the end of the year on what they are going to achieve. And they met the goals to the point that the approach now is being replicated in other parts of the organization, in other regions, also including support functions, because that's where the hierarchy goes to hide. HR, IT, these are the people, even central teams. These are the people that are more distant from the market.
Right.
And eventually you have to convince them that they should feel the same pressure as any other customer-facing group and should give value for money. This is again difficult, and there are hacks to do that. One idea to do that is, instead of building only these small autonomous teams, using multidisciplinary teams, in which, again, this is similar to Agile, in which you can bundle IT people, digital people, HR people, or at the very beginning, pre-negotiating contracts with this function. So HR is staying as it is, but the head of HR is signing a contract with my microenterprise to give me some kind of services with some kind of service level agreements. So they have committed themselves. They are going to benefit in terms of profit sharing from it. They're going to pay the price if they don't respect the commitment. This is very real. It's impacting the numbers at the end of the year. It's not theoretical. So my message is, if you're a hierarchy, it doesn't matter. You can get started today, and there are hacks, answers you need to take responsibility on, and no, we may want to come back to this, for getting started with this journey now.
Right. And what you have been telling so far, I think that the good piece here, I can imagine, I'm just trying to see what your answer is. You start looking more and more to the outside, to the customer, to the actual, value creation, right? It's not just an inner game where you just, create a structure because you need the structure for the sake of the structure. It's actually, I mean, even if you would not end up with what you were expecting in the beginning, the result would be, hey, we have more drift into the direction of the market, which obviously is important to survive, right, for any business.
Yeah, it's about breaking down this artificial barrier.
Right, right.
That is conceptual, but also operational, but also financial.
Right. It brings me to the next question. Because obviously, first of all, there is this principle, zero distance to customers, or, at least minimizing it, bringing people closer to markets, everybody being a CEO. Hey, that sounds wonderful, right? At the same time, hey, here's a company, here's an organization with a traditional culture. And we know not every employee is ready to become a CEO, or to say without fear or become a CEO or an entrepreneur. So in the scenario of an evolutionary transition, would that be potentially something to look into in a way, like making it optional for some part of the organization and the other part, or what's your experience with that?
I think the difficult part in this conversation is that, as Kevin Nolan of Hire would say, there is no model. So there is no right answer.
Right.
And in this case, Hire has an answer. The answer is there is an expectation on employees to act like entrepreneurs. It's quite clear. I say it's quite clear because everybody has a basic income by law. There is basic. So unless you find yourself, so there is no organizational department allocating you as a resource. It's you bidding on opportunities and allocating yourself on those opportunities. So it's you finding work and getting money because you generate outcomes from users. And those users pay you directly, not through the organization, but directly. That's the only way you can earn a reasonable, even meaningful salary. So there is pressure. Not everybody wants to do this. There are still different roles in the micro enterprises. Not everybody is a micro enterprise owner, but there is pressure. Now take Zappos. Zappos has been doing exactly the same thing. They're not called micro enterprises. They are called circles because they have been adopting Alagorithms. They have been called it random AI. They've been called it the market-based dynamics. So again, it's the same, taking inspiration from the market to bust bureaucracy internally and to facilitate fluid and transparent exchanges of value between teams. But they have been doing with a totally different culture. They don't ask all the employees to be owners. It's perfectly fine if you are not comfortable at being an owner. It's a possibility that you have. But it's perfectly good if you want to be a good team member. So, cultural differences impact the design, and of course, all of them have an impact on what you bring to the market. Another example that I've seen in Zappos, that I have seen in Make, is how you measure value. So the easiest way is profit. So at the end, you are going to be measured in terms of the money or the revenues or the profits you're going to generate. What they are doing, both Zappos and Make are doing, and they call it, Zappos call it the triangle of accountability. Make, a small company, calls it the Trinity. Again, similarities. It's profit. You are in a for-profit company. Customer outcomes, could be loyalty, could be satisfaction, and employee engagement and retention. So you see, you have different indicators, and you need to optimize the three of them, not just one of them. So what you're doing is you're balancing the different needs, and you're releasing a bit of pressure, and the company's values, the culture, play a big role in how you feel into this environment and on the expectations and behaviors. So I think, again, there is no single best model. What we know is that we can learn from the market. We can apply, probably we should apply dynamics from the market to get rid of bureaucracy. But technically speaking, we can do that, and we can measure that in different ways that are more resonant with the unique trajectory and DNA of the company. And somebody has to take ownership of it.
Right. All right. So that's already, so there are possibilities, not this black, white, and
Absolutely
ways
not.
to balance things out, as you say. That's probably always the helpful thing. Now, let's assume we're entering this stage where we want to found micro enterprises, circles, whatever we call it, these units of creating value. And I mean, the first question is how to create them. I can already imagine, well, how to create them. It's focusing on value, right? It's what we're after. But the question is, hey, we're coming from a place which looked different. So how would we then split this up, what we used to know, into something that can work?
I believe this is where we connect to the other part of what Boundaryless does. So Boundaryless, talking just for a bit of my company, is focus on two areas. One is organization design, what we've been talking about, but the other one is business innovation. So how to thrive into ecosystems. And there are tools, ecosystem scans, through which you can find a position into a new business model, a new role in the market. And we believe this should be the input of creating a microenterprise. So it's not an organizational exercise only. It's understanding the business and understanding the organization design and taking inspiration from both. So it's very important. For example, we have one canvas. What we do is publishing most of this knowledge in an open source way. So we have public canvases that you can take, download, and use, as we said last time. Yeah. One of them is to create microenterprises. Yeah. And if you look at the canvas for creating microenterprises, there is a question about cost revenue structure. And the nudge is to go towards exponential effects and network effects. So to be able to play some kind of role, not just to do a microenterprise, but to do a microenterprise that will enable millions of other nodes to come together with a marginal cost that tends to zero.
Right.
So finding a way to do that, of course, is another ability that you need to grasp. You need to apply. So there are ways to do that, and then there are ways to answer in terms of organizational traits and mechanics.
Right. So having set up such a unit, is there a traditional leadership in there? Like, hey, we're just coming from the hierarchy. How does it look like then in terms of running the structure, right? Making decisions. I mean, decisions, I think, is a key thing here.
This is another important aspect of IRE. It doesn't try to specify everything. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine a microenterprise as a black box. Mm-hmm. It has interfaces, a bit like a microservice, right? So you have a module and, APIs to interconnect your organization with or your company with other pieces. But it doesn't say anything about what is happening inside the module, inside the microenterprise. Mm-hmm. For example, about decision making. So you could use consent, you could use consensus, you could use autocracy. And I believe some approaches are more in line with what we are saying, but there are different ideas here because the RNA doesn't specify. And this is also an interlock with other frameworks. So you could say, okay, I want to act as an agile team into the microenterprise, or I would like to agile as a sociocratic team, or as an holocratic team, or as a teal team. You know, it's up to you, and there is plenty of freedom. So the RNA doesn't try to cover all the spectrum of the decisions. There are so many decisions on which there is no indication. In Boundaryless, we are using both sociocracy and the RNA exactly for this, and also for trying to create better interconnections between microenterprises. Because the big question is not just having microenterprises, is helping them to work together. And just keep in mind that microenterprises can compete. So there is competition, but there is also collaboration. So you need a way to do that. What happens if my needs go against your needs, the needs of your microenterprise? There is no manager, there is no father that is going to, find agreement. We need to find agreement, and consent from sociocracy is a way to do that, to decide quickly, but also in an inclusive manner. If you don't like sociocracy, you can pick something else, but still you will need to have a way. IRE uses something called the ecosystem micro community, and that's the second concept. The ecosystem micro community, again, is a contract. Contract is a recurring keyword in IRE. It's not a bureaucracy, it's not a hierarchy, it's an agreement in which my microenterprise and your microenterprise will decide the kind of services they will exchange to benefit customers. Customers are always there. So again, this is a way to facilitate alignment but it's a different level. So you have to feel a need within the micro enterprise, and you need to feel a need also beyond the micro enterprise, and not everything is specified. So there is ample space for experimenting or mixing the random AI with other approaches.
Now that you made, so that's already interesting because that gives many organizations who are already trying, and I think many do, many of those methods and practices you mentioned, a potential, right, to say, hey, it has been a little bit limited so far. And I'm speaking a little bit about my Agile background, because we know Agile wanted to go where what we talk about at the moment, but in most cases, especially in large organizations, it usually isn't, right? It's this, internal unit, which is very,
IT team
yeah, in
mostly, yeah.
IT, in the worst case, even only IT. But even in the past years, that's why probably this term business agility came up to say, hey, there needs to be more than just agile practice and software delivered to your neighbors next door. And I think here we're talking about this bridge to say customer, market, whatever you do, maybe it's Scrum, whatever you do, but now we're playing the real game. Now, my question actually, just from your experience, is there a sort of distribution where many of your customers are coming from this background or are using stuff like Scrum, or is that hard to say because it's just everything out of anything, what you experience?
I think it's a bit of everything, but
Oh, yeah.
agile is very diffused.
Yeah.
And again, to bring an example, Bosch
Yeah.
Power Tools,
Right.
a different company, different industry, different culture, coming from an agile angle. What they're doing is extending the agile experience, so multidisciplinary teams, going beyond the functional design, through something that is similar to RNA, in which you have multiple teams working together, exchanging services, and you have these different capabilities into the same team, and you start to see the customer. So if we abstract a bit, that's what the 3O, the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Enabling Organization, wants to be. It's a way to abstract from higher, to jump to the universal patterns and needs, and to make all of this more accessible to people coming from holacracy, from sociocracy, from agile, from beyond budgeting, because at the end we are fighting the same battle. We are calling it with different names, but we want to give more freedom to the people, unbundle the organization. We want to find ways to reconnect the people around customers, rebundle the organization. You can call it micro enterprises and EMCs or in a different way, but I guess this need, in this case, this organizational need, is totally common. The catch is, in most cases, we still introduce bureaucracy and management. So we have a way to connect the teams. It's called management. We have been doing that for decades, but we have been paying a price in terms of disengagement, in terms of customers that are not happy, in terms of being too slow to decide. What we are doing now is to get rid of management and to do this with tens of thousands of people. But the need is there. So if you're coming from agile, great. Probably you can reuse a lot of it, but you're adding a piece on top of it. And that's about this scalability, this new way of thinking the organization as an ecosystem. And within the team, you can use Scrum and Kanban boards and stand-ups and retrospectives and everything you want to use. There is really no conflict here.
Now we jumped quickly into this, hey, let's create a micro enterprise. That's easy, but actually there are probably a lot of things to consider because, hey, didn't we talk about strategy? Didn't we talk about we manage a portfolio of our offerings like products and services? And now suddenly here are the micro enterprises. Now the first question I have is, of course, all right, who decides what? I mean, first of all, what kind of decision, how does a micro enterprise decide what they want to go for? That's number one. And second, how are they then keeping, being aligned in terms of, well, maybe it's not even aligned, to look at a similar thing like a portfolio or strategy?
That's a great question, because with all this unbundling and fragmentation, it may seem that there is no longer a company, right? We have 4,000 teams doing whatever they want to do.
An open market, right?
It's a market, it's not a company. And this question is difficult because we are taking inspiration from the market
Mhm.
in a place in which transaction costs go down thanks to technology. So, where is the boundary? What's the distinction between the two? And this distinction, I would say it's messy coherence, again, with Sonia Bligno and this note. And what I mean with that is that strategy is no longer centralized. It's no longer imposed from the top, but still you need to nudge the system, and that's the enabling constraints, to do some things and not others. It's more about attracting, it's more about pull than push. In IR, this is called industry platforms. Industry platforms are very broad directions, such as Internet of Food, right? It's broad. It's fridges, it could be chefs, it could be maintenance, it could be distribution. But it's a space that, in this case, in the case of IR, the board decided as strategic and on which the company wants to invest. So you have an invitation to new owners, to employees, and to micro enterprises to join the space through investments. You can decide if you want to accept this investment. It's called a valuation adjustment mechanism. So there is a format, there is an investment contract again to do this, but it's you are free if you want to bet in this space. If you want to have your startup in this space, well, you can take the money, you can agree on the conditions, and then what we are doing is nudging the system to do many bets into a specific space. And they have many of these spaces. So there is complete coherence? No. Is coherence imposed or controlled from the top? No. But it's nudged. It's sustained. So you have messy coherence. And this is for the high level. Then there is another kind of strategy within the micro enterprise. The micro enterprise has three rights. The second and the third one is picking the people you want and pay them, sharing value with them, how you want. But the first one is strategy. So the first one is deciding your direction, how you're going to achieve the goals that you have negotiated with the company and through which you got the investment. So you decide, IR calls this leading targets. It's, I want to become the leader into this market. I want to sell 25,000 pieces of something. The how is totally up to you. And the 25,000 pieces is negotiated, not imposed. There is no cascading down process or budgeting process for it. It's you as a micro enterprise owner saying, okay, I'm committing to do this. This is my conditions. I want to have investments. I need to have people. And then I need to find a way to do it. I decide. The micro enterprise decides. There is no boss, there is no board that can tell me you need to do this. Of course, it's a bet. It may work, it may fail, and we will learn from it. But strategy and coherence are the other big difference, discontinuity between IR and the other companies, and there is also a difference between an ecosystemic organization and a market.
That sounds very interesting. And I think you mentioned already last time, you mentioned it partially today, that all of this is operated not only manually, but in combination with pretty clever platforms, right? They make use of. You mentioned the contracts. So there needs to be obviously mechanism of modern technologies to run such a network in order to not turn into chaos, right? I mean, again, even 4,000 units, you could imagine by just talking to each other and writing some emails and picking up the phone, it will be hard to steer. Is that a precondition to look into modern technology for such things, for
I wouldn't
government?
say it's a precondition because giving for granted you're not starting from 4,000 microenterprises, but
Right, sure.
from four. You can use a piece of paper, to be sincere,
Right.
or maybe an Excel file. Exactly, whatever the tool you like. That's the beginning. So there is no big barrier to entry and investment. But eventually, you will have tens or hundreds or thousands of microenterprises, and then you will need technology. And that's what we are building. So what we are going to do with IR next year as Boundaryless is to create this technology based on the blockchain and based on smart contracts that automates, these exchanges and also the distribution of value. When we have reached our leading target as an aggregation of micro enterprises, the value is going to be shared with all the parties according to the contract automatically. There's nothing to do. There is no manager making payments or saying, okay, yes, you did this way. There is an agreement. There are statements about the obligations, and then there is a result, and there is this sharing of value. This is only one way. I said people are not assigned to teams. That means that you need a place in which you can find the work. So in the same platform, you are going to find all the micro enterprises looking for resources, for people, and you can bid on these opportunities, saying, I'm the best qualified to be your team members on this. And the micro enterprise owner will talk with me. There is a talking still. So it's not a DAO, it's not totally distributed. There are still human beings into the organization, but it's largely supported by technology. The same for EMCs. So if you look for micro enterprises with some specific services, this is happening through technology. So at the end, you have a market, really a market supported by internal technology with full transparency on who is doing what, with what kind of commitments and what kind of value creation. The last example I want to share is reputation. Mm-hmm. We should realize that most of this happens through trust. So you are basically making a big bet and looking for teams to join you in this big bet, but you don't know how they're going to perform. So reputation, after each contract has been executed, you're going to evaluate the others. So everybody is evaluating the others, like stars, So you can know that a bit like on Amazon or eBay, okay, that Mike's team has been performing very well for the last 3 years. So yeah, I want them in my team because probably they're going to help me. All of this can only happen through technology, but the same is true in Morningstar, or the same is true through Burzog. So all of them are using technology to get rid of bureaucracy and paradoxically to bring back humanity into the organization. So technology is not a way to pull people out from the organization. I don't believe into that. It's a way to get rid of what we don't want to have in our organization. So people deciding for us and too much time for taking decisions or executing work.
Yeah. We're coming close to the end of today's session. And probably we have still some more 5 minutes to go. And I think that brings us nicely to what you just said, what the essence might be of this whole thing, because you just mentioned trust, right? I think it could be dangerous to look at this from a very mechanical perspective. Probably a better alternative is to look at a living organism, right? Because we look at a network, and it's a network happening within a network, because it's the network of the world. It's the dynamics of the markets and so on. And you mentioned purpose. We mentioned basically principles. Most organizations are driving from principles. What's your experience? How to make, let's say, the connection happen beyond just, contracts and negotiation and, point-to-point communication? Are there these typical large-scale company events where people get together and, last but not least, learn from each other, right? Because what I'd be always looking at would be to say, let's not sub-optimize. We need to take care not to sub-optimize the units, the small units. Is there something like that? Building trust, learning from each other.
So I think that it's even beyond the network. It's really a complex system. Sure. Complex system means that, it's not linear. So you don't know, you put an input in, you don't know what the outcome is going to be or when it is going to come. It's not linear, it's not totally predictable. It's emergent, so you see different properties at the organizational level than what you have at the team level. So it's a living thing, as you said. It's not a network. So what you bring in terms of principles is important because it's going to be amplified somehow into the system. And there are some beliefs that we should stress behind it. The first belief is that human beings don't need to be managed. Human beings are capable of great ideas, great value creation, great autonomy. There is the belief that human beings can come together without much support, and again find a way to work together and create more value than they will do as individuals or as a single team or even as a single company. All of this is baked into the organization. And then there is the belief that you cannot have an organization that insulated from the market. You want to, something we didn't discuss is that the customer is not the one paying, is the one giving you ideas, working with you to refine and to iterate, giving you to subscribe and to buy the product before there is a product, and even spreading the word about the product or the service when it is going to become available. So the market and the customer are really into the company, are not somebody else, something else. These are beliefs. So most companies or some companies don't believe this is important, and that's fine. So I would start with, if you want, a vision of the world, not just some business goals. And then the organization you should design, and that's a responsibility that each organization should take, taking organization design as a strategic ability, as a business ability, not just as an HR thing, to create something that is emergent and that is in line with this vision of the world. That's not what we are doing when we design organization. It's usually about boxes, about control span, about trying to optimize, trying to make managers happy. Here, there is no organizational chart. It's fluid. So again, I believe the starting point is even a bit more subtle, if you want, philosophical in this case.
Right.
And if you trust into that, you are going to get results that most of the market cannot achieve.
Right. Awesome topic. There are probably tons of additional questions. I'm just thinking about, right, how to, what the innovation space, usually we have problems with creating innovation spaces in organizations, right? To me, that sounds like, hey, it's basically made for innovation because it builds it in.
It's everywhere.
Exactly. So it's just happening. You don't need to create it specifically. But Sven, and I would love to take this as a final question for today, or maybe as a final, before we have a final hint, because he puts up more like the practical things. Like, have you ever seen facing regulatory obstacles in organizing something like that? We can easily think about balance sheets. Internally, that's one perspective, but externally, we might still be, when we need to present normal, P&Ls and everything.
Yes, definitely. So some of our clients are in regulated markets. Think about financial services, think about pharma companies.
Yeah, sure.
They cannot do whatever they want.
Exactly.
They're going not to be fined by the market, they're going to be fined by the regulator or by their compliance function or by their governance. So what this means is not that this is not possible. It means, again, that you need to take responsibility for designing an approach that will fit your unique environment. Just an example, a couple of examples is in hire, of course, you have a basic income. In Italy, there is no way you can say to employees, okay, you're not going to have any base salary, or I'm going to reduce your base salary. You can only talk probably about a variable pay. So it's different. You cannot fire 10,000 people and ask them to become managers. You cannot do that. And there are many examples like that for which you need to find solutions by co-creating, also in this case, with legal, with compliance, with even institutions in the market. And again, we are at the very beginning, and I don't think the goal is copying higher. Is going maybe in that direction, but with solutions that are unique to your environment. So yes, you will find obstacles, and that's part of their journey to do all of that.
Yeah, wonderful. I wanted to put this comment here from Nuria because it's inspiring. It's not a question. It's obviously something, call for action, and looking at the same thing, maybe from a different angle. And that brings me to the final. It's rather a pointer than a question, Emanuele, because it's more like, if people want to learn more about this, first of all, I think here is a link which puts them or brings them to your platform, where you have a
Yeah.
lot of interesting information, open source information. That's the first thing. If they want to go deeper, I mean, first of all, they have your contact. We're sharing your contact. What would be the first step apart from talking to you?
So there are a few things. Of course, there is the website. It's
Mm, mhm. Yeah,
www.boundaryless.io.
right.
On the website, you will find canvases. So you will
Hmm.
find tools to learn a bit about that. We're going to release this month an adoption guide and new toolkits for doing this. We have trainings, so we have master classes in which you do it instead of talking about it with other practitioners, with other companies, and of course, we also do consulting services. So
Hmm.
for those organizations that want to really do it, and if they want to have help, we can do it. And finally, we have a community of practice. It's
All right.
new,
Good.
so it's just reach out, but it's community.boundaries.io,
Awesome.
in which you can find other practitioners and thought leaders that are doing it and discussing it. So, it's really a co-learning exercise. We don't have all the answers. We are trying
Right.
again to be platforms here, so to
Right.
facilitate learning together.
Awesome. I would have asked if you wouldn't have told it about community, because I believe learning is so much important. There's so many new things to learn about, and community, learning with each other is so important. Emanuele, it's been such a pleasure again talking to you, talking with you. First of all the best for the final bits of this year. That's the first thing, and I'm looking so much forward to next year having a few additional interactions, whatever will become possible. But I think these topics you're onto are super important and super helpful for many organizations.
Thank you so much for the space. I hope we raise some interesting points for the people listening. Just connect if you want to know, or if you want to share your notes with me. I'm very keen to learn from others. Thank you so much, Mike, for putting this together.
Awesome. Thank you. Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.